Fairley, Walden Farty, Ian a special to Armagh and Sean Shaw, to Lords Live, being Percy Agnami. Mr. Chairman, special guests and fellow members, thanks very much indeed for affording me the opportunity to speak on the economy. Over this last week, the news has been dominated by one firm, Patton in Ballymena. But I, as a constituency representative in Mid-Ulster, have been contacted by numerous firms who have been suffering the consequential of that. People, it varies from £2,000 to over £1 million, subbies, suppliers who have been left in the lurch. Now, I'm setting a context here. That's an awful lot of people owed a lot of money, and inevitably a number of those firms will go to the wall. The point I'm making is there's a lot of instability at the moment. There's a lot of insecurity. The rumour mill is in overdrive. What firm's going to go next? I'm setting the context because people are looking to us as part of the executive to give clarity, to give vision, to help develop the economy as a driving force with the support of some of our friends from Britain in particular. And Vernon, I do hope that was music to my ears as I heard you mention reduction in VAT, long-term investment projects, skills and tax breaks and the likes. That is what the local community wants to hear and, more importantly, wants to see delivered. The welfare reform itself will have major implications on our small retail sector, where the post office is attached to the local supermarket, where people less disposable income, all of those things. And really, the sooner we have social democratic values back at the heart of government in Britain, for as long as we're attached to Britain, that is, of course, and delivering to us here in the north on those values, it's crucially important. Now, to make the serious point, and back to the context, people are looking to the executive to deliver. People are looking for decision making. People want us to see the corporation tax is not a silver bullet. All it does is create a more meaningful context within which foreign direct investment can be attracted to the north. And we're on a level playing field, and I never use the word competition between both parts of the island, where the island on a level playing field is able to attract foreign direct investment. All political parties in the north agree on the importance that the devolution of power to set the corporation tax into the hands of the Northern Ireland Executive and Assembly, and to harmonise the corporation tax rate across the island of Ireland and maximise the attractiveness to foreign direct investment of our intelligent, hard-working citizens and the markets we have access to. But it's just not for foreign direct investment. A lower corporation tax would also encourage growth in our indigenous business sector, creating jobs in the process. This is just but one component of the required revival plan for our local economy, but it is an increasingly important component in a global market. The protracted negotiations which have gone on, it seems, interminably between Sinn Féin and DUP ministers, Northern Ireland Secretaries of State and the UK Treasury have only resulted in the forwarding of a number of options to David Cameron, and it's an indication of the failure of those negotiations to arrive at an agreed position. And depending on when you're talking to or who you're talking to, Sammy Wilson or what the occasion might be, the cost of corporation tax can vary from 200 million to 500 million. At this point in time, I would have thought that at least the figure work would have been done. On Monday last, I met with the new Secretary of State, Theresa Villiers, well-informed lady, no doubt, but there was very little detail coming forward in terms of delivering corporation tax. Back to the point. What the community, what business, what our young people are looking for is coherent, clear decision making. And I'm not too sure indeed if there ever was an agreed position between Sinn Féin and the DUP ministers to begin with, and that's an open question. But now is not the time for the executive to abandon the decision-making process to political machinations within the Tory-led government. That government which is imposing its welfare cuts on us. Uncertainty is fatal to economic growth. While local businesses and businesses across the world wait to hear what the future holds for corporation tax rates in the north, they will delay investment here in the north. No amount of glad handling on global junkets by the First and Deputy First Minister or any of their political underlings will change that. Our economic recovery demands the full commitment of those ministers responsible for negotiating the devolution of corporation tax. Instead of that required commitment, the appointing of political blame has already begun, and we see that in the Assembly. Now is the time for the Executive to step up to the mark, to redouble its efforts to secure the devolution of corporation tax to the north, giving the Executive and the Assembly the means of assisting in the stimulation of the economy as a driver for job creation. The Northern Ireland Secretary of State, if that position is to have any real meaning, must be engaged by the Executive in that effort. Let us see that influence of the Secretary of State within the Tory-led government. Let us see the successful devolution of corporation tax into the hands of locally elected politicians, and let us help create the context for jobs, for a future, especially for our young people. We have to put an end to the misery trail of parents seeing their kids leave in the boats and the planes for Australia. Thanks very much, Mr. Chairman and fellow members, and I propose the motion.
And I would ask Conference to very carefully consider it before they vote on it. And the grounds in which I'm asking Conference to reject this motion is that the numbers simply do not add up. They just do not add up. Just in answer to one of Patsy's phrases about the cost of corporation tax, nobody actually knows, because corporation tax receipts aren't collected at a subnational level. So we don't know, and that's why the figure keeps changing. So I'm just going to try and attempt to bring up some of the other issues around corporation tax that need to be considered. Regretfully, corporation tax is one of those issues that's become a very much political issue, and the kind of economic practicalities of it have been sort of pushed to the back. And particularly I want to raise, the first point I want to raise is the difficulties with figures. As I've already said, the Treasury do not collect corporation tax receipts for Northern Ireland for the simple reason that it would be disproportionately costly and time-consuming to do so. So the methodologies that are used to calculate these figures are quite often based on gross value added and GDP per capita, etc. But these are methodologies that are highly flawed at times. So therefore, any figures that are presented in terms of corporation tax in relation to Northern Ireland should be treated with a huge, huge pinch of salt. Patsy's has articulated the case for corporation tax very well there, so I'm not going to go back over those, but there's a number of major institutional weaknesses in the Northern Ireland economy that might prevent us from achieving the full benefits of that. For example, there's major skill deficits at every level of the labour market. And I mean, a lot of the reports have been just would have you believe that corporation tax would suddenly bring about these skills just magically. That is not the case. What is needed is long-term strategy to rectify these problems in the labour market, and that's a 20-year, 30-year, that's 4 decades of work. It can't be done in a year. In addition to that, there's very high levels of people deemed economically inactive, and there's also major infrastructure deficits in comparison to other lower tax regions. We also have to consider the opportunity cost of this, the impact of the block grant. The figures that have been bandied about are corporation tax that cost roughly £300 million in the first year, rising to £700 million by 2015. And again, these should be treated with a wee bit of consideration. But even if the policy succeeded in stimulating huge amounts of economic growth, it could not do so enough for the receipts to get back to their former level by 2030. One of the prominent devolution economists, Gerald Holtham, when he was at the Northern Ireland Economic Conference there a few weeks back, said that just to break even on the budget, you'd have to grow the economy by 30%. And the most optimistic estimates are saying that we can only grow by 14%. So the numbers that we do have, that we can't even rely on, actually just don't add up.
In case you can tell, I'm not local. I'm from somewhat further south than the Republic of Ireland. In Australia, the flat company tax rate is 30%, not 24% that the UK has, not 20% for small profits, it's at 30%. And furthermore, we've just introduced a new tax, which is a further 30% tax on super profits made from the mining of iron ore and coal. I'd like to point out that Australia is one of 2 countries in the OECD that didn't go into recession. Now, while it's true that a lot of that is to do with the fact that it's a well-performing commodities country, the other reality is that it has sufficient tax levels and a strong and fair regulatory environment. So I don't want to get into this discussion that somehow regulation is bad. Fair regulation is needed to make sure that economies perform to the best of their capacity. So just to sum up, what we do know is that it will in the long term cost 700 million. What we don't know is how far, if at all, that's going to go to create jobs in the medium to long term. So I'd urge conference on those grounds to vote down this motion. Thank you.
Chair, I want to speak on this motion, and after hearing 2 very well-informed speeches, the last 2 speeches were exceptionally well-informed. I'm inclined to vote against. As I said, I was going to be neutral on it. I think it's true, as Vernon Coker said, that reducing corporation tax is not a panacea. But I think we should be very cautious about this. There is a body in the world today called the tax, or in GB, called the Tax Justice Network. And in the UK economy, and unfortunately, Patsy, we're part of that economy, corporations a generation ago contributed 40% of the tax take. It's now down to 20% and falling rapidly. And if corporations don't pay tax, and we all know, anybody that reads the magazines or takes an interest in this, you know, the Starbucks and the Googles and the Amazons, they're all finding ways, and they're putting pressure on democratically elected governments to reduce corporation tax. And as Justin said, it is a race to the bottom. And if corporations don't pay tax, who pays the tax? We do, individuals. There fundamentally is only 2 sources of taxation: corporations, which are artificial people in law, and individuals like ourselves. So we need to be very cautious. I'm in favour of a level playing field, as Patsy says, but only if tradable goods and services are made here in Northern Ireland. We don't want to end up like a Cayman Islands, Christ without the sun, or a Jersey, which is a deeply corrupt island, and everything is in favour of mammon. And also, American corporations, especially, are pressing this thing of the race to the bottom in corporation tax. And what that is doing in that country is increasing the inequality. The top 1% under Bush have got 6 times wealthier than they were before. Chief executives in American companies are earning 400 times the average wage. A generation ago, it was 20. Now, it's a little bit sad in a Social Democratic and Labour Party. I see one of the composite motions saying that it should be reduced to 2%. As Justin said, corporations have rights and responsibilities to the rest of us. Another point is that with Scotland teetering on the edge of leaving the Union, I don't think it's going to happen anyway. And as a chartered accountant for 40 years, let me tell you, the Deloittes and the KPMGs and the PwCs and the people that put reports on the executive's desk saying there's going to be 55,000 jobs created, you should treat all accountants, all chartered accountants and tax experts as on the same level as you would treat snake oil salesmen. The other thing is, it has done a lot of good in the south, but as happened in the International Financial Services Centre, it went over the top in terms of, as the Financial Times said, in its latter years of the Celtic Tiger, the International Financial Services Centre became the Wild West of European capitalism. We don't want to get involved in this. I don't want to see, as I said, I don't want to see brass plate operations here, or just rolling the profits through here, as Google does. They make a lot of money in France, and they roll those profits. They channel those profits through Ireland, and it gets a bad name. I see the red light is on, but just be very, very cautious about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter Gibson.
Chairman, Peter Gibson, North Down branch. I want to speak in favour of the motion, and also to maybe respond to some of the things being said by colleagues in Balmoral. This motion is quite simple. It's just calling for the devolution of corporation tax. And it goes no further than that, and I think that is a positive thing we should ask for. Now, Gareth has made an interesting argument and was good enough to give me a copy of his paper, which is attacking the concept of reducing corporation tax to 12.5%. Well, this motion doesn't call for the reduction of corporation tax to 12.5%. In fact, I remember a very good discussion, I think probably Fergal chaired it, 2 years ago in the Ramada. We had top economists. We had John Simpson, we had Neil Gibson, we had Mike Morrissey from the north, we had John Fitzgerald from the south. The three guys from the north all agreed that it was a good idea for corporation tax to be devolved. And they said on that day, and we may have disagreements about what the level should be, and the cost of devolving corporation tax, if we change it, the cost will depend upon the level. And some of them might argue, if you brought it down initially from 24% to 18%, that might be enough to stimulate a certain amount of activity. But the cost of devolving it to 18% is not going to be the cost of 12.5%. So this motion is not calling for the implementation of a certain rate of corporation tax. It's calling for it to be devolved in principle, so that people in Northern Ireland can determine and have debates about whether it should be 18, 12.5 or 15 or whatever. That's a subsequent matter. Also, on the issue about the argument which Gareth made, really, and with my Chair of Standing Orders hat on, what in fact your argument was to amend this motion. And you should have proposed an amendment to the motion to extend the devolution of corporation tax to include the other issues that you felt were as important. And that was the line that you should have taken, rather than to oppose a motion which is quite simply calling for the devolution of corporation tax and doesn't say any rate. So I would urge that the motion be supported.
Okay, thanks, Peter. Just bear with us, Peter. Gareth has a point of information, so if you could just...
Sorry, Chair, just on a point of information. Actually, I don't think that's an accurate reflection.
Well, that's okay. That's part of the debate. Okay, that's part of the debate. Okay.
No, actually, you should have. You should have called for amended motion.
Okay. All right. Listen, we have two more speakers on this. Can I call now Dominic Bradley? And he'll be followed by Joe Byrne.
Míle mai agad chathairní agus amise. Par bheith sásta tachiacht go hort tom rún seo mar atá sé molta ag an feisre McGill. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I'm happy to support the motion which was proposed by Patsy. I believe that the debate we've had today here has been useful. It has given us the opportunity to look at the pros and cons of this particular motion and of the devolution of corporation tax. And that is useful, and it's also healthy in my view. I believe that the lowering of the rate of corporation tax in the north will be a major tool in helping to rebalance the economy here. We are already over-reliant on the public sector, and all too often the public sector is at the mercy of the political winds which blow from Westminster. And I think we've seen that very clearly in recent years. Not only that, but the current tools that we have to develop the private sector, although they are useful and necessary, they're also limited, and they have not been successful in bringing about the growth in the private sector that we need and require. We need to develop the private sector in order to generate more employment and wealth, and to deliver the revenue that we need to provide the best possible public services. Foreign direct investment, an increase in foreign direct investment will be a major influence in rebalancing the economy, and a lower rate of corporation tax will be a major element in attracting it and closing the productivity gap here. Indigenous businesses will also benefit from a lowering of corporation tax, and it will provide our small and medium-sized enterprises with additional capacity to invest and grow their businesses. I believe it is not, and it should not be, a recipe for making fat cats fatter, as Eamon has indicated. Nor should it be an opportunity for companies to brass plate their way to greater profits without making any worthwhile contribution to the economy here. And these are dangers which we must guard against. At present, as Gareth has pointed out, we don't know how much corporation tax is taken in the North. There are varying estimates from DFP and from the Treasury, and we do need an accurate baseline figure so that we can assess the true impact on the block grant and manage the shortfall. We know that the corporation tax take can be volatile and that it can vary from year to year. So we need to offset the costs associated with the devolution of corporation tax powers. So it's important that we are in a position to avail ourselves of the indirect benefits which will result from increased economic activity, such as the receipts from increased income tax, VAT, national insurance, excise duty, and indeed the corporation tax itself. These should be key elements in the negotiations, and we must make sure that we get the best possible deal for the North in those negotiations. Although the devolution of corporation tax powers and the lowering of the rate here is not a magical mist, or as Patsy said, a silver bullet that will cure all of our economic ills, it is an essential tool in rebalancing the economy, making the North a more attractive prospect for foreign direct investment and enhancing Indigenous economic activity. That will result in a more prosperous North for all our people. And I am in favour of going beyond corporation tax and at looking at the devolution of corporation tax within a wider package of fiscal levers, which would give us a much greater say in our economic future and prosperity. And I would agree with Gareth in that. But still, in the end of the day, I commend the motion to conference as one which will be of great economic benefit to the North. Thank you very much.
And finally, Joe Byrne.
Thank you, Chairman. Delegates, I want to draw your attention to motion 75 from the Armagh branch. Now, Brian Kelly was to be here to propose that this morning, but he can't be here. I think we need to establish some clear facts, and Dominic has made reference to them. The 6 counties of Northern Ireland is dependent on the British Treasury for an annual cheque of 8 billion sterling per annum, plus or minus 1. That's the economic reality of this region. The other economic fact is, if you take the Republic this year, 2012, despite the financial problems with the banks, despite the public finance problems, The Republic will be a net export earner of €183 billion in 2012. That is our startling economic performance, believe it or not. And it's largely due to the way the private sector works. They have a much stronger private sector dependent economy. We have a much more public sector dependent economy. With the welfare cuts that are looming and are going to happen, you better ask yourself, what standard of living do we want here going forward? Do you want a reduced standard of living or a better standard of living going forward? Most people want to have at least the same or an improving standard of living. It's crucial, therefore, that the private sector is stimulated sufficiently to create jobs in the future. One of the most important tools in the kit is corporation tax. This will have to be done over a 5-year period. It can't be done all in one go. But the sooner the Northern Ireland Executive makes a determined decision in negotiations with Treasury to have a 5-year calibrated approach to this, the better. Let's do the deal with the Treasury. If it's 300 million, then let's calibrate it at 60 million per annum, savings from within the existing structures and pay back over 5 years. But let's get the signal out to the foreign direct investors that might be interested in considering this location. If we don't, we won't have FDI in the future. The one startling reality of F.G. Wilson is this: investors make decisions relating to a return on capital. The board obviously decided in a contracting world market for generators, which plant was the most susceptible or vulnerable. The reality is that the plants in Northern Ireland. Why? Because the corporation tax is much higher than some of the competitor regions in the world. Sorry to say it, the economic reality is we will have to get lower corporation tax if we're going to develop a private sector that's viable, sustainable, and make this region less of a public sector dependency culture into the future. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Joe. And we move straight now to a vote. All those in favour?
From 1 year to 6 months. A bit of background to this proposal. It is timely in several aspects. On the 30th of March this year, the Conservative Lib Dem coalition passed a law that increased the amount of time you have to work for an employer before you can make a tribunal claim if you're sacked unfairly. They increased it from 1 year to 2 years. So basically what they're saying with that is that companies need 2 years to decide if you're a good enough worker or not. That's just plain wrong. By doing this, a further 2.7 million workers living in England and Wales are now at risk of losing their jobs without an avenue of support. This is a very troubling social development, delegates, especially at a time when unemployment is the highest level in Northern Ireland, as it has been since 1997, and the safety net of the welfare system, as I mentioned before, is under gross and unprecedented attack from the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats. Now, in Northern Ireland, employment laws devolved, so we're lucky. The qualifying period here remains as 1 year. What I put to conference today is that we have an opportunity to not just weather the storm, the eye of which, as best I can determine, circumnavigates the seats of Cable, Cameron and Osborne in the Houses of Parliament, but we have an opportunity to go further to improve fairness and security in Northern Irish workplaces. A longer qualifying period for unfair dismissal is linked to insecure work. Young people are particularly at risk of being dismissed unfairly, as they're a category of worker that have the shortest employment history. This is especially the case in Northern Ireland, where unemployment for young people sits at 21.1%. So it's not just a matter of a young person gets sacked and they can get up off the chair and go and get the next job. And as I say, the welfare system is also under attack that would otherwise be there to support them during times of unemployment. Very tragically in Northern Ireland, we all know too well the strong links between unemployment and suicide in the region. And what do the Conservatives say to this? Employers should be able to do what they want. Tribunal hearings cost the state too much. What I put to conference is that you can never put a price on fairness and security in the workplace. What I put to conference is that the social ills of both this hire and fire culture and unemployment outweigh any gain, any imagined gain to taxpayers and employment imagined by the Conservative Liberal Democrat coalition. Under previous UK Labor governments, the qualifying period has been as low as 6 months before it was increased to 2 years for the first time by Thatcher's Conservative government in 1985 in its unprecedented attack on working people of that year. To summarise, as a party of workers' rights, the SDLP